I'm not into podcasts.
I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again! What a hit!
Back of the net.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Not a Punnet Deep Dive, a somewhat regular series where we delve into the major topics happening in the world of football so that you're ready for the weekend pub chat. In this episode, we'll be chatting about whether football is the clean game that many fans swear it is, with recent positive tests from both Juventus' Paul Pogba and AC Milan's Papu Gomez. It's starting to look like all may not be what it seems. I'm joined, as always, by the walking, talking, football encyclopedia that is Mr. Killian Giddity. Killian, how are we going?
That was possibly the best intro I've ever gotten for anything. I'm very well, thank you. Busy week. It's been very entertaining football. It's just seeing the general kind of news and the Man United takeover still kind of rumbling on, all the rumours around that. So yeah, it's been going well. What about you? You all excited for Champions League nights?
I'm excited for Champions League nights, but I'm also trepidatious at the same time. You know, we are Newcastle United at the end of the day, so we could, beat Palace 4-0. We could also probably beat Dortmund 4-0, and then, lose to Oldham Town. But it's just the way it goes. But it's great to see Champions League football back up in the northeast.
But I do have one question. Why are we talking about doping this week? Because, I think of doping, I think of Lance Armstrong, I think of Brock Lesnar and USADA and the UFC, and all these hench lads are getting this sporting advantage. I don't imagine Exeter City or bloody Fulham being how can you dope in football?
So it's a very good question, and the rationale why it came into my head to kind of go onto this topic is actually, it's funny you mentioned USADA because the UFC have ended their partnership, are ending their partnership with USADA come the end of the year, which made me go, because I like anyone, I would think they're the only people in the world that do it. So then I kind of went down a wee rabbit hole of doping, and like you said, Lance Armstrong, childhood hero of mine. My first love was not actually football, it was cycling, I know, the big reveal, but the stat that I just came across when I was looking at the USADA UFC pieces, there's 140,000 footballers in the world and only 40,000 drug tests per year. So on average, your professional footballer gets tested every 3.5 years, and only 1 in 10 dopers are caught. So I was like, okay, we've all heard a few names, and I was like, it's not an entirely clean sport, but there's no sport that is. But I was like, I wonder how many have we got, and how far back does it go? Yeah. So I think the two main people, I suppose, that I came across in quotes that have really come against them was Seb Blatter, who said, footballers have absolutely nothing to gain from taking drugs because, in contrast to other sports, they need a vast array of qualities and skills to succeed in the game. On paper, sounds great, fair enough. But then you think about it, when there's multi-million contracts available, people will do whatever they can to get to that level. It's the same as the Olympics, where how many sprinters in Jamaica have tested positive for performance enhancing drugs over the years, and they know to get to the level.
The Russian Federation have been caught.
And for anyone who is unaware of doping in sports at all, I implore you to watch Icarus on Netflix. It's one of the best exposés of performance enhancing drugs I think ever done, and it originally didn't start out to be that, so it's a fascinating world. The second quote, Gordon Taylor, you might remember the name, ex-head of the PFA. I'm almost certain that we have a clean sheet over performance-enhancing drugs. So I understand from the top down that, the administration, players, managers, any association are going to want to be far away from this. And to be honest with you, I was quite naive over the last 10 years, and you knew there was questions, but I never knew there were so many examples. So I don't know how much you know about doping, Mr. Ginnity, but there are kind of 3 different layers of what it is. Any guesses what they are before we jump in?
Is there ones to make your brain work better, one to make you bigger, and I don't know, one to give you gills or something?
Not far off. So we got obviously this is a shortened list to the full maximum of all opportunities to dope, but the ones we'll focus on are anabolic steroids, which names we'll come across in this are stanozolol is basically it's my pronunciation, but it's stanozolol, nandrolone, methadone, also known as dialabol. And they're basically any anabolic steroid. They increase muscle mass, decrease body fat, and improve recovery time. I think every listener is like, yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit of that.
Yeah.
There's also banned stimulants like ephedrine and amphetamines, and they improve focus.
That's a
and
name
alertness.
I know. I've heard of amphetamines.
yeah. I think we all know them. And now there are obviously, I suppose, PSA on this. We are talking about the benefits of these drugs. There are obviously copious amounts of very bad things that happen if you take some of these steroids and stimulants. So I think a little warning on that one. And the third one is masking agents, which is basically ways to block drug testers finding anabolic steroids or banned stimulants.
This is the kind of stuff I've heard from like the UFC, where there's always a new scam or a new claim that you'll get around this type of testing, and they brought in different versions of testing. So like they had ones where it's like, rather than it just being on the one day, you had to test clean over a certain amount of time, but even apparently then you can still get around that kind of stuff. So like, is this a modern thing, or is this like when does doping and football begin their not so lovely relationship?
So I think there's two ways to look at it. There's when did it first happen and when did it get big. First happened, you go right back to the 20s. And you know, we're going way back here.
Back in the black and white era.
Like not even you nor I wouldn't have, our voices would have been heard across these lovely sound waves back then. Arsenal, first ones in, I suppose always ahead of the trend. They used pep pills, not Pep Guardiola people, in the 1920s. Bit of a gap, bit of an unknown as to the benefits of these pep pills, but it's the first kind of sighting of it. Second one kind of surprised me. Stanley Matthews, the Sir Stanley Matthews,
Jesus.
Use of amphetamines in 1946.
What?
Yeah, long time ago.
But he was like famously clean. Like he was definitely a vegetarian, if not a vegan. He was such
the vegans.
But he was such a health freak. He wouldn't even smoke at half time. Like he was the original Messi. Like he played top flight football until he was 50, and then went around the world traveling, playing football until he was 70s. And then in his autobiography said that was a career tragically cut short by injury. Like.
And now we know why.
The man was yipped running around the place.
So we see amphetamines, they seem to be the drug of choice at the time. Next up, and this is kind of the last of the historical pieces per se, Manchester United's Albert Scanlon and Busby Babe Harry Gregg using amphetamines. And like I said, you know, amphetamines, one of their benefits is the improvement of focus and alertness. For a goalkeeper, huge.
Yeah, that one kind of makes a little bit of sense with that kind of era where like the mods and the rockers and all that was just starting to come out, and they were all popping pills and big amphetamines thing. If you haven't seen Quadrophenia, go and watch it. It's fantastic. But like,
absolutely,
the precursors to the Quadrophenia era was that, and I'm like, that makes a little bit of sense. And like, especially when you consider like George Best and all that, it's kind of like, okay, if that's what he was kind of growing up around. But like, really, like what? Back then, there was no money involved, so were they doing it for glory or just for high?
I think there was no money in it per se, but in terms of, I suppose, back then, these guys were, you know, builders, car salesmen, factory workers, and I think there's either a personal gratification to it. There's if I play for Man United, people will come to my car garage for everything. Like I think you always the thing to look at doping through the whole of this deep dive is look at the macro. What are the factors outside of the actual game of football are the reasons for this? Next up, we take a little bit of a continental tour to Italy. So Italian football was plagued by allegations in the 90s. kind of right throughout. And in 1998, a French doctor living in Italy publicly said, he didn't say who the players were, but he said he'd given multiple Serie A players EPO. Now, EPO you will have heard from our good friend Lance Armstrong. EPO is blood doping, so it's endurance. It's kind of lasting longer, so it kind of plays into what we all know as hard-working Italian, defensive, never let up. Could there be a reason there back in the day? In the same year, the Roma manager questioned the physical development of some of the Juventus players. And the lovely federales of the police in Italy raided Juventus. Would you like to guess how many pharmaceutical products they found in the club?
Maybe like one per player? Like a squad of 20 something? I don't know.
281 pharmaceutical products. And of course, the club and players denied any wrongdoing at all.
Juventus doing anything wrong? No.
I heard they've great relationships with referees and administrations and doping controls people. Sticking in Italy, in 2004, a leading hematologist testified in court that he was practically certain that then Juventus player Antonio Conte had used EPO, and he stated so that one of the reasons that you'll see players or athletes who've been caught taking EPO is anemia, because it is used to treat anemia.
Okay.
So one thing to remember again within doping is have you ever heard of a TUE?
No. It's
called a therapeutic usage exemption. Basically, if you have asthma and you need your kind of inhaler, you get a therapeutic usage exemption because, let's face it, you can't be a professional athlete and be asthmatic and be left alone to your own devices. Now, you'll see a lot of...
That'd be like TRT Vitor for the UFC fans, where
pretty much
38-year-old Vitor Belfort came back with a better strength than he had when he was 20, because I believe it was down to him using so much steroids that his testosterone
had just dropped. It had just gone.
Yeah, so
he wasn't creating anymore. Yeah.
So like he was allowed just to basically take all the tests that he wanted and got a medical exemption for it, so became 4 times the man that he was. So footballers can basically do the same.
Pretty much. And not even just footballers. This is like the likes of Mo Farah has 8 or... Yeah, Mo Farah, a long distance runner, he's got between 8 and 11 TUEs. So like there's always been questions around him. Bradley Wiggins in cycling had a plethora of TUEs. Chris Froome as well. So it's one of those where obviously people have medical conditions and there's no denying that, but I think it's also a case where we just don't know, are these real and are they, I suppose, valid? So
with Conte, is that how he grew back his hair?
And we kind of well, he had some hairline after a trip to some doctor. So going back to the anabolic steroids route, I think this is the major area where it became prevalent in what we're going to call modern football, so 2000 onwards. So again, just to remind people of anabolic steroids, so this one in particular is called nandrolone, and because of its anabolic properties, nandrolone is used amongst athletes as a doping agent to accelerate muscle growth, increase lean body mass, strength and aggressiveness, and to allow for faster recovery between athletic performances. So whatever you need, this thing does for you. Pretty much, you're injured, it gets you back quicker. You're dipping form, it's getting you more aggressive. You're undersized, you're getting bigger size and strength. Shout out to the Bayern Munich doctors, just making players go beast mode when they go over there, or Madrid.
But we're not collating. We're not collating the drug and their fantastic medical stuff.
just highlighting their impeccable ability to grow players. So the first player to pop, kind of post 2000, very familiar name, and this one surprised me. I hadn't heard about this at all. Pep Guardiola positive twice for nandrolone as a player during his time in Italy.
So
Yeah.
that was relatively late in his career.
He, I believe he was at Brescia at the time. I think it was towards the tail end. So initially he received a 4-month ban, 7-month suspended prison sentence, and a €9,000 fine. He claimed it was a medical condition that caused the result, and through the jigs and the reels, the decision was reversed in a technicality. So technically, didn't happen, clean player.
So him and Man City are just match made in heaven. They love our technicality.
Next up, we have same season, 2000-2001, Christian Bucci. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Bucchi. Centre forward, was playing for Perugia and tested positive for nandrolone. Claimed the reason was excessive meat consumption after a wild boar barbecue.
Let he who hasn't had a wild boar barbecue cast the first stone.
And so the thing that this is also something that's happened even up to 5 years ago. A lot of athletes who test for low levels of performance enhancing drugs blame food consumption or tainted products. John Jones in the UFC stands by that he took completely clean products, and because a lot of these products are made in the same factory, protein powders and anabolic steroids, so they use the same vats and there's going to be leftovers in them, is what
so there is a bit of validity to the claim.
There is cross contamination. Now your kind of top brands, I won't go into which brands they are, but they'll have their own facility where they just purely make that product. But a lot of the cheaper kind of, own brand protein powders a lot of the time are made in vats with millions of other products. So to say that it's completely invalid, not fair. But then you have the likes of Christian Bucci or even Canelo Alvarez, the boxer, recently blamed meat consumption as the reason he kind of tested positive. So it's not new. Next one up, I think you probably will remember, because he actually served a ban for it. Jaap Stam, again, nandrolone, 2001. So this is...
Was he at Lazio then?
I can't remember exactly where he was, but I do remember him being in Italy at the time. And this goes back to what that doctor was saying about the 90s. So it didn't end.
3 in a row that's Italy-based.
And when we go through the list again, keep going down at Edgar Davids, 2001, nandrolone. Frank de Boer, nandrolone. Now, he was not in Italy. He tested positive after Barca's clash with Celta Vigo. Initially got hit with a year ban, which in 2001 I don't think anyone had ever been banned for, bar like your Cantona kicks and stuff like that. I don't think anyone was banned that long.
Bucci, yeah.
But then this is where it comes back to the food side of things. The ban was chopped down to 11 weeks when it was ruled that the Dutchman had unknowingly ingested by means of contaminated food supplements. So is
this the claim that you can't disprove it, so you kind of have to give them a slap on the wrist, or because I get it with the likes of whey protein and all that, but could it really be enough to skew a full drug?
I think
is it actually that hypersensitive?
So it comes down to volume. So what you could get away with back then versus now are completely different things. So the volume of measurement back then was milligrams. So you had to have a fair amount of this substance in you compared to now it's picograms, which are like a millionth of a gram. So it's like the UFC doctor, when it was going on with the John Jones case, said a picogram is like throwing a grain of salt into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So there is very little room for error here. While back then it would have been the whole swimming pool to get caught.
Wow.
So it's if you're caught back then, it was easier to get away with it, but to get caught you really had to be poor at it. And I think anyone who's seen any of the Lance Armstrong documentaries or the movie The Program, it's a true story. He's kind of training by his kind of motorhome during one of the trips abroad. Gets a call from the doping commission saying you've popped for, I don't know, EPO or testosterone or any of the plethora of extracurriculars that man enjoyed in his career. And his next thing was just turn to his physio and goes, right, we find a product with that in it. And they found a saddle sore cream that they explained was why this product was in him. And the commission were like, oh yeah, fair, cool. Now, that you're talking 90s, 2000s, so again, wouldn't happen.
Imagine the money you could have made by just making products specifically to have whatever the EPOs were. It's like, right, Lance, what do you need this week? Oh, you need EPO. What do you use? Do you use like wheels, saddles? Saddles. We'll make a saddle cream for you. That's great. Okay, now off you go. You make a fortune.
You'd be loaded, and
time machines. That's what we need.
It's also like the guys that figured out doping must have, or like both the doctors who actually did the illegal activity and the doctors that figured out how to figure out the illegal activity. Yeah, like it's money everywhere. You know, we can go into kind of couple other pieces, but you're starting to see what I mean. There's starting to be enough names here that you're kind of going,
household
what's
names.
today like? Yeah. We go a little bit, you know, as leaving out Pogba, because this is all alleged with Pogba. Obviously, his double test has come back positive as testosterone or a version of testosterone, which would be similar to these nandrolone cases, but I think
Is
that
it still
was in
an
the courts.
ongoing case? So
We leave that one out.
Yeah.
Same with Papu Gomez. I think all the cases that we're touching are in the public domain and have been addressed and closed and all of
Moved
that.
on from,
yeah. So now we come on to masking agents. One of them being hydrochlorothiazide. And Fred at Man United. Now, he wasn't at Man United when this happened. It was in 2015. But he served a 1-year ban after testing positive for a banned diuretic. So diuretic, obviously being trying to flush this out of his system. Being hydrochlorothiazide, used as a masking agent. That's one of the kind of ones.
Yeah, he would have been
He would have been
maybe
up there.
Shakhtar Donetsk then, maybe, or around that time.
I believe so.
It's either that or just on the cusp of the move, yeah.
I tell you, we need to get a Jamie like Joe Rogan does, just to fact check this stuff for us. Next one, you'll remember the name of this one too. Same situation, hydrochlorothiazide, trying to flush it out of the system. Was then Cagliari striker João Pedro. He popped in 2018. And it was a double positive, so there's absolutely no denying that it was in a system.
Yeah.
And he was banned for 6 months, but was back in action by the September, having been done in the February, and came back and scored in a key 1-1 draw with Milan. So they kind of forgot about that over at old Cagliari.
Yeah.
Next up on the masking agent side of things, same again, just it's basically used by athletes to mask it in the presence of urine or excrete water for rapid weight loss, basically to just confuse your system that it can be found, or if it is found, it's kind of there's a supposed rationale for it. And a user of furosemide is none other than Andre Onana.
Oh yeah, I remember him in Football Manager when he was at Ajax, not being able to use him because he had like a global ban, but I never actually. I was too lazy to actually look into it.
Yeah, it was done in the Cameroonian became the subject of a widespread. This is now reading from the report. Widespread media attention in February 21 when he was hit with a 12-month ban from UEFA for testing positive. Now 2021 is very recent, and I am surprised that Man United 2 years later would get into bed with a potential doper. I mean,
but United have form. Just remember Rio, like. They love it. They love it.
Yeah, they're aware of it, yeah. Now, the rationale as to how he ingested said substance is where it gets a bit curious. He said he'd accidentally taken his pregnant wife's medication by mistake and would appeal the decision. The ban was reduced from 12 to 9 months, but it ended up with him getting pushed out of Ajax because Ajax of old didn't stand for anything that didn't look like pure football.
And I think it was actually whatever about Ajax's point of view, like they would take a kind of hardline stance, but I think it was him that ended his career with them because they didn't stand behind him. That he was like, oh, I'm innocent, and they're like, nah. But yeah, they as I say, I never actually looked at it, but I do remember there being a falling out at the end, and him kind of going, "Nah, I wasn't happy with how you handled this whole thing, so I'm happy to be gone." So yeah, like it makes sense why he went to Inter at such kind of at that time a relatively reduced rate, because he was
out of a job.
Well, no, but he was on before that ban. He was my go-to kind of like, if I have the money in Football Manager to sign a really good goalkeeper,
Really?
I'll get him. Yeah, no, he was fantastic, and he's just that little bit eccentric, so he'd always be a little bit fun. Like, you never know if you'd see him up at a corner and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, my kind of guy.
So I think last on the masking agents, we'll all remember this one. Samir Nasri.
Is this the photo?
Yes, bring yourself back to 2018 or 2016, should I say? And he got a 500ml drip infusion of water and micronutrients, which doesn't sound like a lot. It's a pint, but it's 10 times the allowed amount under the WADA code, the World Anti-Doping Agency code. And yes, the famous photo of it's Rebecca Vardy moment of it's Samir Nasri's bag. So yeah, like, I mean, I don't know about you, man, but obviously I've gone in the weeds on this one, but off the back of that, we'll bring it back to Britain in a second in terms of the potential doping there, but you really have to think abroad it's questionable, you know? And if abroad's questionable, how is Britain not?
Oh yeah, like if whatever Europe's doing, like the UK are definitely doing best case scenario. If not, they're doing it a little bit worse. They might be able to hide it better because like the Premier League is that much more riding on it. But what's kind of surprising me though is like you haven't mentioned UEFA once. Like even Sepp Blatter under FIFA got a bit of a mention. You're not hearing a whole lot from UEFA on this.
That's a very good point. And the reason for that is most of anyway, unless you'll see it differently with the likes of betting, where it's a global wide ban, and that's for another deep dive to come.
Coming soon.
But pretty much it's left up to the local association. So be it UK, it's the FA, Scotland, SFA, Ireland, FAI. So they police their own pieces. UEFA send the staff to do the testing, but the execution of the punishment is done locally. So I think that's done a bit to keep their nose clean. Pardon the pun.
So could it be the case, or is it the case that do UEFA set some kind of guidelines and say this is the allowed amount, or is it different from kind of FA to FA? Where it's kind of like what could get you banned in the UK won't get you banned in France, let's say.
So it depends on the association that's governing the football. So say UEFA would work with WADA, and then so therefore WADA's regulations across the entirety of every territory is WADA regulations. If it's MLS, you're under USADA. Now USADA and WADA's pretty much the same, but they will differ in both the amount of times they can test you, when they can test you, where they can test you. For example, with USADA, you have to have what's called a global passport. I believe WADA have it too, where at all times you need to update them where you are on the daily. So where this gets tricky, and athletes have got caught out before, is say you're Lionel Messi and you are playing in Miami one day, then you have a promotional shoot in New York 2 days following that, then you're in Buenos Aires for international duty 3 days after that. If you're not updating that yourself, or you don't have a guy you trust updating that, you can miss it once and it's kind of a fine, a low level ban. Miss it twice or 3 times, you're out of it for like a year or more. So you need to be on it, and it's also that like when they come, you need to be there. So it's not as simple as I'm in Miami. They need to know what street you're on in Miami, and if you're going to go out, that you'll be back within an hour of anywhere you are. So you go on a boat trip out for 3 hours into the middle of nowhere, they need to know.
What if you're just like you and the missus want to have a little like they just come and knocking?
They're coming. And the a lot of footballers talk about it where you get pulled for a dope test after a game and you're completely dehydrated after a game. They're gonna wait with you till you do your pee test. And your blood test is easy; they can do that whenever. But urine test, they will wait. So a lot of players are like, they've just won major tournaments and they want to be celebrating with their mates, but they're sat there in a room with a dude just waiting to go for a leak, and it won't come.
But like, what if you have like an Alex Ferguson who's like, everybody on time on the bus and all that, and you're just there like, please, I just need to pee.
Well, I tell you what, they used to say Alex Ferguson waits for no man, but he will wait for Wada.
Right, bring us to the UK. Let's bring it back to kind of our own recognisable neighbours. Give us the dirt.
The Mail on Sunday reported that as many as 88 footballers in Britain failed doping tests between 2013 and 2020. The cases that showed use of performance-enhancing drugs now, kind of, I suppose the likes of cocaine and heroin come into technically performance-enhancing, and even though I don't think any high-level footballer is going to be doing heroin, but there has been a lot of coke use with the likes of Adrian Mutu and Mark Bosnich. Exactly what I was going to say, yeah. Some other players. So some of these players will come under that, but the ones that were performance-enhancing included positive for amphetamine again. So our friends from the 40s and 50s are still out and about. 3 for triamcinolone. And this brings it back to what I was saying about the TUEs. This is a substance that Bradley Wiggins used to treat hay fever before his Tour de France victory. So there's a lot of ways to treat hay fever. I am someone who suffers it, and I do not take that. So that, there's questions. Maybe I shouldn't have win a Tour de France, and we'll go into a cycling podcast then. Some more that were found in the Premier League: Ritalin, testosterone booster, human. I'm not even going to try pronounce that one. HCG is the initials for it. You can do your look about. We found in Premier League cases. Again, we see it in other sports. The HCG is used and abused, to be honest, by cycling and MMA athletes. And this is, I think, the perfect way to round it off in this TUE situation. So UKAD, which is the UK Anti-Doping Agency, explained that no sanctions were handed down due to either accidental ingestion or the player having a TUE. So TUEs are rife, which I didn't think. I knew they were in Olympic sports and martial arts and all kinds of things. Maybe naively, I never thought that it would come into football, but. Yeah, as I said, other positives, though not necessarily from Premier League tested players, showed use of morphine, cannabis, cocaine, amongst others. Cannabis, I think the UFC have lightened their stance on. It used to get you multiple year ban, and now they're fine with. I mean,
anybody that can play a high level game of football or fight in MMA with cannabis, like they
it's a bad man.
Yeah, like. I believe with the use of cannabis, one could struggle to ride a bike, let alone win any titles on it. So like, they're different gravy people. Like,
and like I said at the start of this, one of the best documentaries I've ever seen personally is Icarus, and the main character, real person in Icarus, is Grigory Rodchenkov, who helped thousands of athletes cheat across dozens and dozens of sports. But Rodchenkov claimed that Zenit St. Petersburg's head of medicine around 2017, 2018 had, in his words, very practical experience of doping sports people. And then in 2019, so again, very recent, Dutch player Fernando Rickson, who was a former Zenit player, he brought out a biography, which I will admit I haven't read and probably never will. But he said there were needles and syringes all over the place and players hooked up to drips. He said, I didn't have a clue what Dr. Pukov, who is the person Grigory Rodchenkov was talking about, was putting into me, but man, did it work, did he say. Spartak Moscow players said the same, and then I suppose
just
the final
on Zenit,
point.
Just before you go on the final point, that Zenit squad, I'm just have to Google it there because I was like, I definitely know some of the players in that. There's a lot of recognisable names.
And this is what I mean.
So like Yuri Zhirkov, formerly of Chelsea
Yep.
fame under Scolari, um, Domenico Crisicco, who was he was at Juventus. He was a left back. Played for Italy as well. Sebastian Gerussi, football manager
I remember him.
favorite
Yep.
from
Yeah.
River Plate. Another football manager favorite, Emmanuel Mamana, centre back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mateus Cravinter, another Argentinian defensive midfielder. Again, another football manager favorite.
And again, we must stress we are not citing that any of these players are or have taken anything. But
No,
all
no,
alleged.
but this is a team that has a potential allegation against it, and this is the level of players that they had at the time, like Branislav Ivanovic. Like, this is
Chelsea
close
stalwart.
to home. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is close to home.
And speaking of close to home, kind of off the back of this and what had been going on in the 90s, the early 2000s, the 2010s, in 2004, Wenger said that the testing of blood samples indicated that players joining Arsenal from abroad displayed symptoms of prior EPO use. And in particular, their red blood cell count was abnormally high. And he went as far as to say, to kind of defend players in a way. And this is something I said to you during the week. It's kind of, he said, there are clubs who dope players without the players knowing. The club might say that they're being injected with vitamins and the player would not know that it was something different. And that is very possible. But I do think as a professional athlete, I don't know about you, you need to know what's going in your body or be ready. If you don't care, you need to be ready to take the punishment, because it's probably coming your way if you don't know what it is.
Yeah, but like when you consider like Tevez, is he managing now at Independiente? Head to notapunto.ie for this article. He was basically saying that some of the players can't even read or write or struggle to count.
I did see this, and I could
So,
not believe. I couldn't believe it, but I could. But it's
So
when you
have
see
a lot
things
of
like
these,
that.
yeah, when you have a lot of these guys are basically coming straight from the streets because of their physical prowess.
Yeah.
They don't have the education behind them to be able to question it. And don't forget, a lot of the time, the clubs are now the ones leading the education. So,
Yeah, they're in control of their upbringing.
like, not casting any aspersions on, I fully believe that they're getting the correct level of education and it's all within, like, the country's education standards. But it would make you wonder. Like, I know obviously Wenger was making this comment back in 2004. It's nearly 20 years ago, so you'd hope things would have improved and the level of knowledge for players now that they would at least question what's in a syringe going into you.
But then at the same time, and you're only making me think of it now off what you're saying there about players not being able to read or write. Awful for people in that circumstance, but that would suggest they come from a family that cannot read or write either, which probably means a low level of income for that family. So those players are probably willing to do whatever you need to do to bring money to food to the table. You know, a couple of good years in even South American football, and it will change families' lives. You know,
For generations.
yeah.
Sad.
So I think that's the perfect way to end it. You know, we've kind of set out our stall. I hope I've educated you a bit and brought you into my pessimistic world, Killian.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was fascinating. Thanks so much for, like, I didn't realize there's so many types.
Well, and for anyone listening, honestly, dig into it a little bit. And I started out with British teams, I suppose, just as what I know, but there are plenty of stories around the world that, you know, either have been prosecuted for them, or the players have been prosecuted for them, or have not. But it's a fascinating topic. And let us know in the comments or through socials if there's any cases we missed, and we might have to do a second deep dive on it.
Yeah, especially with the potential Pogba and Gomes updates that we might include.
We'll definitely keep an eye on that. So I think we'll leave it there. Everyone has our first deep dive. That brings us to a close. You may have heard a few coughs or chesty kerfuffles between myself and Killian. I promise you can't catch anything through the airwaves. But it is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. Thank you very much. Don't forget to follow us on our socials at Not Abundant Podcast and check out our new website, notabundant.ie. We'll be back next week.
Bye-bye.
I'm not into podcasts.
I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again.
What a hit! Back of the net.